There we go. 17 waiting.
Okay, you can let people in.
Cool.
It's 9 o'clock.
All right. Hi, folks. Welcome to Race and Acupuncture. This event is a fundraiser for the Black Acupuncture Association located in California and hosted by the Goldman Institute for Social Research in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Sean Burrill. I'm an STS researcher at the Goldman Institute and will be serving as your moderator tonight. This discussion is the first installment of a series we're working on about race in various professions and will be recorded as part of a larger discourse concerning health and medical practices, contemplative philosophy, and science and technology studies. Momentarily, I'll be sharing a link for the donation box. Feel free to give whatever you can to support the Black Acupuncture Association and the wonderful work they're doing in California. Also, feel free to follow us at the Goldman Institute through our Instagram page to get updates on what we're working on in the coming months and to listen to some of our recorded book reviews. As a matter of Zoom room etiquette, I'd like to ask that you please keep your microphones muted while our two speakers are presenting. That if you have any questions for Dr. Fawn or Dr. Danebridge throughout the course of their dialogue, to send me a private message through the chat box. I can then unmute your microphone during the Q&A session, or if you prefer, I can also read your question aloud. If you hear anything that you'd like to applaud, you can certainly use the Zoom emoji function, or if you're feeling especially energetic, dance fingers are also welcome. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce our speakers for tonight. First, we'll be hearing from Dr. Tyler Fawn. Tyler received his PhD from University College London in 2017. He earned his MA in Religions of Asia, now MA in Buddhist Studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, SOAS in 2013. His research focus is on medical anthropology and science and technology studies with a relationship among religion, ontology, bodies, post-colonialism, and race in Asia and North America. His previous research included a cross-country ethnography of Chinese medicine in the United States, examining the historical marginalization of Asian Americans through policy and legislation. He's currently involved with two projects, a material semiotics approach examining the professionalization of Chinese medicine in America with the regulation of the acupuncture needle and the rise of countercultural Orientalism in the United States through medical contemplative and bodily practices found in South and East Asia in the mid-20th century. Outside of Pitt, Tyler chairs the Goldman Institute for Social Research's Center for Power Studies, where he facilitates a committee to research gun policy and culture with a particular investigation on the technological history and social impact of the AR-15. Tyler is a fifth-generation Vietnamese medicine practitioner, where he has served the Pittsburgh community with accessible, low-cost acupuncture for nearly a decade. You can follow Tyler's academic and professional work, his numerous book reviews on these and other topics through his Instagram site at @TylerFawn_. So after Dr. Fawn's presentation, we're going to hear from Dr. Tanisha Danebridge from the Black Acupuncture Association and Everyone's Place. Dr. Tanisha Danebridge, LAC, received her BS and MS in acupuncture and TCM from Bastyr University and DACH from Pacific College of Health and Science. She has been in private research for over 11 years. She's the owner and operator of Everyone's Place, a mobile acupuncture clinic, author of Unusual Tale of Acupuncture, Racism, and African American History in the USA, co-founder of blackacupuncturist.com, and a part of the soon-to-be revitalized BAAANA. Dr. Danebridge is an avid researcher into the effects of systemic racism, racial battle fatigue, transgenerational trauma, post-traumatic slave syndrome, and how acupuncture can address the racial health disparities gap created by these issues. So I'm excited to hear from both of you today and looking forward to learning more about the complex relationship between race and acupuncture. So off to you, Tyler.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. So before I get started, I definitely want to thank Tanisha for coming out here and sharing space with us to drop some knowledge and to address a really important issue, which has not really been confronted and has been really pushed aside, and that is race and acupuncture. Hopefully the discussion today can bring some lively ideas into play, especially with the advent of the protests over the summer, but also the legacy of anti-racism that has been an inherent part of the acupuncture profession and acupuncture in the United States, which most people don't really talk about. I also want to thank Sean for moderating this, and the whole Goldman Institute for Social Research. And I want to especially thank all of you, because without you, none of this can happen. But also, we need to understand that if we're going to confront these issues, we have to start somewhere, and this is the place where we do it. And please support the Black Acupuncture Association. You can donate. We're going to send the links throughout the whole talk. And please feel free to post any questions you have in the chats. Sean will be moderating a lot of the discussions and questions afterwards. So the way we're going to kind of format it is that I'm going to present some ideas on the racial history of acupuncture, or shall I say racist history of acupuncture in the United States. Then Tanisha will go into her histories. And then we're gonna jive off each other for some questions. And then we're gonna open it up to the public to get your input on things. So a lot of my talk deals with a book that I'm writing. It's basically my monograph into published form. It's my monograph, and it's primarily my dissertation in published form. And it's called When White People Took Our Medicine. And I kind of pose this question with it not only confronting like racism, but also like the structural aspects of inequality in America. And that comes from whiteness. But I gotta ask y'all the question, how is the acupuncture profession racist? And this is something that we're gonna hope to answer throughout this whole evening. And we're gonna go step by step through Tanisha and Mai's examination, but also hopefully through a dialogue with all y'all so we can parse things out. And then confronting this racism and what to do with it, right? Because it's not just this thing where we analyze and examine, well, how do we change it? So before I answer the question, how is the acupuncture profession racist? We must understand that racism and its complementary mechanism of whiteness is not a product of America, but is the foundation of America. Fighting for equality and the struggle against institutional racism and classism is an aberration to the historical mechanisms of this country. Let me repeat that. Fighting for equality and struggling against institutional racism and classism is an aberration to the historical mechanisms of this country. This country, like most nation states, was founded on the exploitation and systematic oppression of indigenous, Black, and brown people. It still operates in the same manner. Marginalization is a key element into maintaining the structures of power, no matter how artificial these constructs are. This is especially true for the acupuncture profession. Before I go further into that, it's really important on terms and definitions and ideas. Specifically, I want to differentiate two specific ideas. That is the medicine and the profession, okay? Medicine is our livelihood. It's what many of our parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles came here with. The profession is a career. It is alienated from culture, history, narratives, and lives. It is shaped from state power, and it gives its authority, and the state gives it its authority. It is also, especially in our profession, substantially white. 68.8% of the profession is white, and 19% is Asian or Indian from the Indian subcontinent. That's according to the NCCAOM's Jobs Task Analysis of 2017. We can get into the nuances of the credibility of that. But the point, and less than 1% is Black. So this is kind of an issue, right? Especially when the foundations, especially in the East Coast, and it has its roots in the West Coast, were formed and shaped by Black acupuncturists, right? So this is the thing that we really got to acknowledge. But before we even get into that, before we get into that whole dialogue, let me ask some of y'all this. Who here has heard of the Chinese Exclusion Act? Anyone? Yes, some of y'all? Good, 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 great. Who here has heard of the Anti-Coolie Act of 1862? Anyone there? Okay, good. The Page Act of 1875, the Geary Act of 1892, the Barred Zone Act of 1917, and the Asian Exclusion Act of 1924. Mind you, the Chinese Exclusion Act was not repealed until 1943. Let me reiterate that. So, Chinese Exclusion Act, which forbid Asian Americans from being citizens, to own land, to have a say in this country, were not allowed to be citizens until 1943. Please understand that aspect of things, okay? So these are forgotten histories that we have, and that has pushed Asian Americans into exclusion, right? But here's the thing. The legislations, these racist legislations also codified, and were the first steps that codified the inability to practice our medicine, right? This was the precursors. This was a little taste of what's gonna come, right? So, since Chinese who were not minors from 1882 all the way up to 1943 were labeled merchants. So if you were not a minor, you would be labeled as a merchant. And the actual ability to practice medicine, so if you called yourself a physician to any degree, would lead you to deportation. So if you were not a merchant, you would automatically, or a merchant or a minor, you'd automatically be sent back, right? So this made Chinese medical practitioners to hide, to blend in, and not get caught. They continue to do this today. This is not some like distant past things. Even in my ethnography, I have met a dozen Asian Americans practicing illegally, or quote unquote illegally without a license, because of mostly language barriers or cultural aspects that inhibit them to even practice, right? So when people are saying, oh yeah, well, that's a long time ago, Chinese exclusion was a long time ago. No, the aspects of even legitimizing yourself as a physician right now, or an acupuncturist you want to call, right? It's still forbidden to this day because of implementations by the regulatory bodies. And we're going to get into that, right? Okay. So with that being said, right, Chinese medicine practitioners, they hid, they blend in and not get caught. They continue to do this every day, but they also served. They served communities in places like Boise, Idaho, John Day, Oregon, and Chinatowns across the country. And this is a key component. They served their communities, right? So this legacy of serving their communities was echoed roughly 100 years later with the Black Panther Party. because what's the Black Panther Party's motto? Was serve the people, okay? This is an important factor in how we understand the histories of our medicine, if we're gonna go there, right? And so if we're gonna say our medicine, I have to question this. Did acupuncture or herbs belong to whites during the 1850s to the 1970s? Did European settlers or immigrants bring acupuncture needles, Asian herbal concocting teas, liniments, or scrapings? Did they bring their exercises such as Qigong, Tai Chi Chuan, which Qigong is, Qigong is a conflicted one because it was technically created in the 1950s, but Tai Chi Chuan, Dao Yin, all these exercises or theories of Qi and Shen, right? Did European settlers or immigrants come with that, right? So my parents came to this country in 1975. They brought their medicine. Thousands of Vietnamese who came here by boat brought their medicine. And here's the thing, our medicine was considered abuse in the eyes of whites. The practice of what we call Gao Ya, which is also Gua Sha, was how we healed our children. Never has a white physician who practiced the Graston method was ever accused of abuse. See, we had to go through this. And this is what makes it our medicine, right? But the thing about our medicine is that we share it. We entrusted white Americans to carry on our traditions and to serve other people. They, in turn, created a profession. So, unlike many contested medical histories, the creation of acupuncture, the acupuncture profession, and I'm going to call it the acupuncture profession because before the regulation of needles, no one cared about herbs, right? If we're going to get it down to the nitty gritty, all of this revolves around the control of the needle. Bottom line, right? We don't see anyone like talking about these turf wars over these Chinese herbal formulas, right? They don't care, right? It's all over the needle. And that should be a really important notation, okay? So the racial history was pretty explicit in how the profession was created. In 1971, New York Times journalist James Reston went with President Nixon on his envoy to China and had to receive an appendectomy. He received acupuncture as an analgesia and wrote it for an article in the Times. Let me reiterate this. Prior to James Reston's trip to China, there were no regulations on acupuncture or herbs, okay? Let me really sink that in, that there was no regulation on acupuncture or herbs. At that same time, a cohort of med students from UCLA started to get interested in acupuncture through the lens of Orientalism. So for all y'all who don't understand Orientalism, Orientalism is the Western controlled imagination of culture, ideas, and attitudes. It is the Western controlled imagination of what they saw is the narrative of culture, ideas, and attitudes. And they believed it as a homogenous East, right? Anyone in Asian studies or has been in Asia, you would know that Asians are culturally heterogeneous. A lot of times we don't get along with each other. That's fine, right? But we're very different, right? You know, none of us are the same, you know, culturally, food, language, etc., right? So the UCLA cohort, who are all part of the 1960s counterculture, all embodied in Orientalism, not only in their fascination of their projected fantasies, but here's the important part, control over the narratives of the East. We can discuss a lot of this later. From the hype of James Reston, the UCLA cohort took advantage of that hype and started to regulate the medicine. So by 1972, they managed to do so with the passage of AB 1500 with the help of the legislator Gordon Duffy. AB 1500 was created so that only medical personnel could practice it for research purposes. This marginalized a significant portion of Asian practitioners, most notably factory worker Miriam Lee, who was arrested over a dozen times. So, still not convinced that the profession is racist? Okay, we'll carry on a little bit more. Until Governor Jerry Brown lifted AB 1500 with SB 86, only whites could practice acupuncture, specifically the UCLA cohort. When Jerry Brown enacted SB 86, one of the cohort members were in open opposition to this bill. But nevertheless, good old Jerry Brown passed it. And SB 86 allowed Asians to finally practice their medicine. But we live in America, and there's some catches to that, right? They still, to this day, besides Nevada, and that's a whole nother story, wouldn't have the ability to regulate the structures of their medicine, right? So from 1972 to 1975, the UCLA cohort spread out all the way to New England, where they went to open NISA, which is the New England School of Acupuncture. Before then, they created the California Acupuncture College. And if y'all want to know who went to that college, if anyone has the acronym OMD after their name, they went to that college. Okay, so those are the old goats, right? And people like Richard Tahn and stuff like that, they went to that school, right? But they all thought it was a joke because, of course, I mean, it was literally controlled by white people, right? That had very minimal knowledge of acupuncture. So basically, the UCLA cohort were then beckoned back into California with the California Board of Examiners to determine the curriculum and the duration of school. It was decided in a men's bathroom for 3 years of education would be the standard. This would later serve as being one of the longest master's degree programs in the United States. So let me reiterate this. This history of the profession, which is most of y'all's education, was literally determined by all white men in a men's bathroom in California. Just let that sink in. Okay, this legacy still persists today. We've recently seen the Council of Colleges, CCAOM, enact legislation to change the word Oriental, to remove that from their name. But here's the thing. I'm personally indifferent with the word Oriental in our profession, especially when the profession itself is built on Orientalism and white supremacy. Removal of it is just rebranding of the actual structures of inequality. Personally, I think it's kind of funny because the use of Oriental just exhibits the ignorance of mostly the white profession, right? And the adamant defense of its use surfaces a festering bigotry that this country was built on. Nothing new there, right? So one thing that we could have done is to reinstate so here's one of the things that we could have done, right? We could have reinstated the apprentice program by the NCCAOM. We could have allowed for international reciprocity. We could have asked for lowering the TOEFL scores by the ACOM to lower the TOEFL score to get into school, right? And for all those old school goats of Chinese medicine, they still cannot practice to this day acupuncture with a license. So if we're going to bring equality into our profession, we need to start with what the Panthers and Young Lords were fighting for: access, right? Most of y'all are still in debt and have nothing to show for. I feel you. We here feel you. We can certainly talk about the predatory practices of schools that have implemented it and they keep disenfranchising Black and brown people, which Tanisha will definitely talk about post-traumatic slave syndrome and racial battle fatigue. I propose something radical, and we can talk about what I propose later. But I wanted to end this portion with an important phrase by the Black Panther Party, and that is all power to all people. So I'm going to end it with that.
That was refreshing. It was really refreshing. Thank you so much for that very in-depth and very brief, very juicy history of acupuncture and Orientalism here in the United States. And so I'm just going to say that if you wanted to see Tyler Phan's thesis, it is available online and you should read it. It is juicy. I'm going to talk about what the Black Panthers were trying to do and why. So most people's understanding of the Black Panthers is what we were given according to the people who wrote history, right? And that would be white people. And what most of us are told is that they were violent, militant, rebellious groups of individuals who were trying to bring communism and socialism to the United States and trying to tear down democracy with the way in which they were doing things. But if you're any student of history, you know that that isn't true, right? They had a 10-point program, and that 10-point program basically spelled out that they wanted equality, and not just for Black people, although of course they were definitely concerned about Black people, but they wanted it for all disenfranchised people, for all poor people. They wanted everybody to be able to have 10 basic rights to life, and that included things like not being jailed, right? Not having to deal with scare tactics, not having to deal with police. And their 10-point program actually went through a minor shift in from 1966 to 1972. And that was a part of the exposure to acupuncture and the understanding of the health problems that was happening in Black and brown communities and in poor communities. So a part of their 10-point program used to say that we want all Black men to be exempt from military service. And in 1972, the change was that we want completely free healthcare for all Black and oppressed people. And that is the part that most people don't remember about the Black Panthers. We don't remember their medical programs. We don't remember their food programs. We don't remember their social survival programs that are still in existence today and businesses have been built off of today. We don't know anything about their mobile units of healthcare that they had that would go out into disenfranchised neighborhoods to get them away from the standard medical community. And we don't know that some of the reasons why they did this was specifically because of racial battle fatigue and because medical racism and medical apartheid is totally a thing. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and I'm going to backtrack several hundred years, right? So Tyler is 100% correct. You know, you got to talk about the pink elephant in the room, and that is the fact that this country was 100% built on racism and an oppression of everybody who pretty much wasn't European, right? So a part of that included the transatlantic slave trade. And when individuals were brought here and forced into chattel slavery, one of the things that they totally lost was autonomy over their bodies, and that included medical care. Now, medical care has come under deep scrutiny because of medical racism, and a wonderful book or a wonderful horror story called Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington. And if you haven't read it, you totally should, right? And so she goes over the histories and she just brings out like a couple of nuggets, because it's only a couple, of what was happening to Black and brown bodies here in the United States in medicine, and how that was accelerated because of the Flexner Act of 1910. So pretty much if someone called you property and they didn't want to get medical care for you because you accused of things like malingering, which means that you didn't want to work from sun up to sundown and you were tired. I mean, that's essentially what malingering was. You were tired, right? You've been doing this your whole life, but adequate nutrition or adequate rest, and usually under the guise of terror, right? So if your owner didn't want to get good medical care for you, they didn't have to. You were separated from your own knowledge and history. You were separated from the bits of, or the extensive, because there's actually an extensive holistic set of practices across the continent of Africa. You were separated from all of these things, and you were regulated to whatever roots, herbs, trees, twigs, and different things that you can learn, probably from the indigenous people who were already here. So if your owner decided that he wanted to give you over to a doctor who wanted to do medical experimentation on you, or who could fix whatever's wrong with you, then that's what happened and that's what occurred, right? So if you think of stories like Miriam Sims, who experimented on African female bodies and perfected his surgeries on them without anesthesia, and then gave these medicated surgeries to white women. If you think about what happened in 1910 was that Flexner, this guy named Flexner, went around to all these medical colleges, and he decided that all the colleges can stay open and they're good colleges if they follow this European medical model. So when he did that, it caused a few things. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it's a bad idea for people to have adequate training. However, with the Flexner report, what happened is we got rid of natural medicine, like in its entirety. There was no more homeopathy, there was no more herbs, there was no more granny midwives, there was no more dealing with self-care from home. And in addition to that, he also closed African-American schools of medicine. So now the only people that you can get care from, even if you have developed a system of medicine over the hundreds of years that you've been here, the only people that you can get care from pretty much are white, right? But in addition to getting rid of herbs, that also, kind of threw acupuncture out the window, because what is this? We don't teach this in European schools. And on top of that, you had to have experimentation. You had to have proof that whatever you were doing was working. That doesn't include the thousands of years of history that goes along with traditional East Asian medicine, right? It was just only what you could prove right then and right there in the lab. Well, guess who you were proving that on? That was Black and brown bodies, right? You would get Black and brown bodies, you would do your experimentation, you would want to have their cadavers so that you could prove whatever it is that you felt that your treatment or medicine or different things were supposed to be doing. And then because there were no Black schools of medicine, there was only 2 left after he closed everything down, you couldn't even find a way to bring bring medicine of any kind within your community, because everything else was pretty much demonized. If it wasn't white, it wasn't right. So let's fast forward to 1971 and 1972. Let's fast forward to the fact that we were having this war in 1966 with Vietnam, but we were also having a war here. We were having a civil rights war here in the United States. And as all of these GIs began to come back from this war that they had been sent off to, and if you don't know that Black people were disproportionately sent off to this war, you need to know that, right? If you were white and rich, you could find a way to get out of having to go to this war. So we're sitting here and we have people who are coming back, but we have people who are coming back with substance abuse issues. We have people who are coming back with the knowledge of heroin, right? We have people who are not only coming back with the knowledge of heroin, we now have a corrupt government, thanks to COINTELPRO, who's helping to push things like heroin into Black and brown communities so that we can continue to do things like over-police, so that we can continue to do things like red line, so that we can continue to do things like a prison pipeline, because if you don't know that prison is just modern day slavery, I just don't know what to tell you. And there are whole books about that, right? So now we have the substance abuse issue, and we have Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, and I forgot who the president was at this time. I'll go look at it in a second, but we have the head of the FBI, and we have a president who pretty much really wants to continue to marginalize and put the squeeze on Black and brown communities. And that's how you got to COINTELPRO. And this is how we got to the demonization of the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, and any other civil rights group that was standing up for the rights of the people, because there were 2 wars happening between 1966 and 1975, right? So now we have the Black Bridge. We have a group of social revolutionaries who are going over to Asia, and they're looking at what's happening in Asia. And one of the things that they're seeing or being shown in Asia is the fact that there is a people's medicine program. There are a group of people, the barefoot doctors, who go around to small villages, who go around to towns, who go around and they help to take wellness into those communities so that they're not completely dependent on having to go into these major cities and these big hospitals. That idea stuck with the Black Panthers. And in 1972, they changed their 10-point program to include free medical access for all, because up until this point, medicine has not been equal. Okay, not up until this point. Medicine is still not equal, and it's 2020, right? But up until this point, medicine was not equal. And so one of the things that they found out about was acupuncture and East Asian medicine. They found out about herbs. They found out about acupressure. They found out about acupuncture. And they found teachers so that they could bring that part of the medicine into the communities. And this is where we get Dr. Matula Shakur, and this is where we get Lincoln, and this is where we get Cleo Silvers, and this is where we get Walter Bosque. This is where the Lincoln Detox Center comes in, because they just figured out, it's like, we're not gonna wait for permission. We're gonna figure out how to do this. We're gonna find our teachers, and we're just gonna do it. And they did. And it didn't require the longest educational program in the United States. It required a willingness to show up and a willingness to learn. And that was it. They would teach you. And so they had the Harlem Institute of Acupuncture, and they had people like Mario Wekshu, who had learned acupuncture with his father, Oscar Wekshu, over in China, and they brought that information over to Canada, and they set up a school and they set up a clinic. They set up a place where people could detox from heroin, but that's not all they treated. And that's another part of racist revisionist history. It's just like, well, they just treated drugs. No, they didn't. They treated back pain. They treated hypertension. They treated diabetes. They treated stress. They treated headaches. They treated problems with birth or with menstruation or whatever the hell it is that you had. They treated it and they didn't care. And if they didn't know how to do it, they had their books right there and they would look up points the exact same way all of your acupuncturists do today. If you don't know what it is and you don't know how to treat it, they would look it up and it's like, well, the protocol says this. Let's see what we get, right? And that is the practice of medicine. And after you've seen it a few times, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that. Like, sit down, I got you, right? And it didn't require the elitism. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't hard to get to, and anybody could do it. They had these mobile clinics of medicine that anybody could learn, anybody could have access, and it didn't require going to go see white people. So now we're going to get into racial battle fatigue, right? Because let's just talk about the fact that having to put on a face every day to stay safe is what causes racial battle fatigue. Having to be in situations where you can't do anything about the discrimination that you're going to face every time you step outside your door or cut on your TV or deal with mass media, that is racial battle fatigue. Every time you have to deal with someone's micro insults and micro traumas towards invalidating your existence, that is racial battle fatigue. And the reality of it is that Black and brown people deal with racial battle fatigue every goddess blessed day. And that is what's creating the racial health disparities gap that we're seeing. It's not a food desert, and please don't get me wrong. Food deserts have absolutely quite a bit to do with what's happening there, right? But that's racism in and of itself. That's part of systemic racism. It isn't just food desert. It isn't just you need to have a smoothie. It isn't that you need to have juicing. And by the way, we don't do that in East Asian medicine. It isn't that you need to do yoga or you need to do Tai Chi Chuan or you need to do Qigong or you need aromatherapy. Like, we need to deal with the facts, and the facts of the matter is that a body that is perpetually under duress breaks down, just like anything else that you ride the brakes off of. That's racial battle fatigue. That's being in white spaces every day and not being allowed to breathe, metaphorically or literally, right? So let's deal with transgenerational trauma. We're coming up to some conclusions and some things. If you don't know what transgenerational trauma is, it is the idea that you can pass off genetic information through the methylation of DNA. What does that mean, right? Let's not speak medicalese. It means that there's an event that happens, it creates a chemical reaction in the body. If the body says, hey, we had to deal with this. We've had to deal with this a lot. We should probably tell the offspring that they might have to deal with this. And so we need to have some genes that will cut on in the sequence to make sure that the offspring will be able to survive and be able to deal with this. We actually found out about transgenerational trauma because of the horrific nature of the crimes that were committed against Jewish people in Germany, right? We found out that their offspring, their children, their grandchildren had a whole host of problems, and people couldn't figure out what was going on. They've looked all over the world and they found transgenerational trauma in a lot of places. And there is a book, the International Handbook of the Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma. Thing is this thick, and it's come down from $700 to like $300. You can get it from your local library. When they look throughout this, the one thing that really makes me sad about this book is they talk about the effects of transgenerational trauma on Jewish people. They talk about the transgenerational effects of trauma on Irish people and the potato famine. They talk about the transgenerational trauma that happens on the people of Hiroshima. They talked about the transgenerational trauma that happens on First Nationers. They talk about a lot of these traumas, and they absolutely talk about the traumas of the African-American community. But it's like, well, slavery stopped. They built wonderful communities. Things seem to be okay. It sucked that systemic racism continued. And so we can't really say if what is being experienced in descendants of Africans here in the United States is a result of 400 years of chattel slavery, or if it's a result of continuing to live with systemic white racism, where we are the linchpin, the center, the square of all racist ideas and ideology. Because, however much racism there is, it's always worse when you're Black, right? And that brings us to where we are today. where we are remembering the snuff film that was the end of George Floyd's life, when we had that deep and poignant moment in the middle of this pandemic that we're suffering from, where I saw in my practice people who had things like idiopathic hypertension, as in you're healthy, you eat well, you exercise, there's no reason for you to have hypertension, and yet you do, right? Not having to go out in the world, I started to see things calm down. I seen things like hypertension calm down. I seen glucose levels begin to regulate. I saw people's cycles begin to like kind of fix themselves out and not be so hinky and horrendous. I saw headaches go away. This is in the first several months, and this is in all of my African-American patients. Things just got better being home and not having to deal with the world. And then George Floyd happened and everything fell apart. And that moment of stillness and silence, we all got to see just how awful it is all the time. We get to see this with the struggle in the election when we're trying to purposely disenfranchise Black voters. If you think that doesn't affect how you sleep at night, you're wrong. If you think that doesn't affect your kidney function, you would be incorrect. If you think the name of the book, sorry, because I keep seeing this pop up down here with my name on it. The name of the book is the International Handbook of the Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma. You can find online copies for free. You can find copies that are a couple of $100, right? Yep, that's it, right? So as we're looking at what's happening in the election, as we're looking at what's happening with Proud Boys, as we're looking at the dog whistles that are happening with Trump, as we're looking at the Karens and Kens who are going out of their way to publicly harass African-American people, as we continue to act like the concentration camps aren't happening, right? As we continue to look at all the 10,001 racial injustices that are happening around the United States, if you think those things aren't having a physiological effect on you, you would be incorrect, because they do. We know that cortisol levels don't go back down in people of color when they go to sleep. We know that your kidney function changes with an instance of believing that you have been discriminated against. That's it. You just have to think that someone is discriminating against you and trying to take basic rights away from you, and your kidney function changes for 24 hours. We know that all of these effects are simply the stress response in the body. And my question has been, for the last several years, why isn't acupuncture more prominent? So to bring this full circle, we know that we've had epigenetic changes that have happened to melanated individuals here in the United States because of systemic white racism. We know this. This is a given, whether we want to talk about the pink elephant in the room or not. We know this, that this is not just Jewish people. This is not just Irish people. This is not just people who've had to suffer with war-torn countries like in the Middle East. This is definitely happening to Black and brown people here. We know that all of these effects can give you ill health. We know that it can affect your heart rate, your kidney function, your glucose function. We know that it can affect your blood pressure. We know that it can affect things like mental health, anxiety, depression, PTSD. We know all of these things. And yet we had this wonderful group of civil activists, including people like Dr. Matula Shakur, the Young Lords, Dr. Tolbert Smalls over here in Oakland on the West Coast. We had RAP Incorporated down in DC. We had this whole slew of people who were trying to bring this medicine into communities who were dealing with these high levels of stress that subsequently created all these other health problems. And yet the 50-year anniversary of Lincoln just happened. We have less than 1% of individuals in this country who are Black acupuncturists. And I know, because I dig for them every day. Every time I see a Black acupuncturist, I know they're tired of me because I feel like spam. It's like, hey, do you know about blackacupuncturist.com? Have you signed up? Are you listed? Are you going to get a membership? We're going to be doing some more things. Don't worry, we're a small board, but we're getting there. It's like, hey, are you Black? Are you an acupuncturist? Are you learning traditional Chinese medicine? Don't care. Get on this website so that people can find you, and so that you can be visible and you can be seen, and you're not a unicorn anymore. Because every time I tell somebody that I'm an acupuncturist, it's like, oh, I thought only white and Asian people did that. Why? Why do we think that when we have this rich 50-year history that nobody has heard of? And that's how I ended up writing that article, right? The Unusual Tales of Acupuncture, Activism, and Racism, because we talk about the wonderful things like the wonderful heroes that we've had throughout history, but Matulu isn't one of them. And neither is Tolbert Smalls. And neither is the young lords. We don't talk about those things at all. Nobody knows. It's the greatest secret that's ever been kept. Because I firmly believe that if we have a society that can sleep, that can function, that isn't hooked on one drug or another, that can get through life without constantly having their life cut from them, because you guys know that we die anywhere from 10 to 30 years younger than our white counterparts, right? And let's not talk about the birth health disparities that we're experiencing. That is 100% racism. That's what it is. If you look at what is happening to women on the continent in terms of the birth rate, if we're talking about equal social, political, educational status, and you look at what's happening with African-American women, whether we're talking about people like Beyonce, or we're talking about Serena Williams, or anyone else Black, that's night and day. And if you bring women from the continent over here, their rates stay the same, but their daughters, their first generation daughters, their rates look just like African-American women. This is the realm of acupuncture, y'all. This is stress. This is liver qi stagnation, right? This is kidney gene. This is gallbladder and all the decisions that we have to make to decide if we're going to stay alive because somebody's calling the cops on us right now, or what can I do to make sure that you don't call the cops on me right now, right? So we've had 50 years to have this medicine incorporated in the African-American communities. And yet I promise you, very few African-Americans know anything about East Asian medicine. They can tell you about Dr. Sebi. They can tell you about Queen Afua. They can tell you about Dr. Africa. They can tell you about Phil Valentine. They can tell you about smoothies and juicing, which, by the way, only really became available once the blender became widely available, like in the 1980s, y'all, right? So we can tell you about raw food. We can tell you about cherry picking an herb here or cherry picking an herb there, which is not at all how you should be taking herbs, right? Herbs work just like food. You don't take chicken and put it in water and boil it and call it soup, right? That's not soup, that's boiled chicken. Soup includes potatoes and onions and string beans and corn, and you make a little roux out of it so that you got some gravy and maybe some dumplings or some barley or something, right? That's soup. That's a whole nutritious meal. And if you're really good, like, you make sure you take the packets of bone broth out of the freezer, and that's how you get soup. And that's how you should be taking herbs. But we don't have that information in our African-American communities because we didn't get this portion of history, this bit of medicine that someone tried to bring to us so that we could pull ourselves out of this purposely inflicted genocide, because that's what that is. When you're affecting birth rates, when you're affecting life rates, when you're affecting people's hopes, liberties, and capacity to live a normal life, we are talking about a genocide, because that's what that is, right? So why don't we know that? Why was that taken from us? Why is that perpetually taken from us? And you compound it with the fact that even if you do find out about acupuncture like I did, then that means you have to go into debt. You have to have good credit. You have to have someone who can sign off on some student loans. You have to have someone who can support you through acupuncture school, because your student refund check is not enough. You're going to have to work, which means you're going to have to burn yourself out even more, trying to learn this medicine to bring it back to a people who know absolutely nothing about it, because we are completely and purposely divorced from this history. All right, I think that's a good place to kind of round up this conversation. So,
wow, that was great. Yeah.
Dr. Fan and I got together because if it wasn't for Dr. Fanyan, let me tell you how I met this man, because I went to a Poca Fest and he started talking about his thesis, which wasn't done then, right? And I was like, can I see it? Can I see it? Can I see it? Can I see it? And he's like, no. I'm not done yet. It's some hinkiness, but I'll get back to you, right? But in that conversation, this is the first time that I ever heard about the history of Lincoln, that I ever heard about the involvement of the Black Panthers and all the many different things that they were doing around medicine, right? And so I went on a search. I was like, well, where's the rest of this information? That's when I found out about WIC. That's when I found about school lunch programs and breakfast programs. That's when I found out that, you know, they had other survival programs that included the first ambulance services that we had here and mobile medicine. And if you guys don't know, I am a mobile acupuncturist. I do not have an office that you can come to. I 100% come to your house. This is when I found out about wonderful other aspects of the Black Panthers that included the fact that they had legal services. They had wrap around services, right? Because the issue isn't just, I got a pain in my neck, or my blood pressure is up today, or my cycle is here, right? The issue is that we have these systemic systems put into place to make sure that you cannot rise above. You have to go into one obstacle after one obstacle after one obstacle. So when I met Dr. Fan, I was like, wow, like I did not know these things about my history, and I've gone through acupuncture school. How come I don't know that? How come I don't know about the wraparound services that the Black Panthers provide? How come I don't know that they tried to bring this medicine into our community? And now the only reference that you can see to that is the Acu-Detox specialist, which I have to tell you completely pisses me off. It's like the only way that you can be anything other than an acupuncturist is only if you're going to deal with drug treatment programs. Why? Auricular acupuncture is wonderful for all kinds of things, including back pain, anxiety, depression, helping to control your vagus nerve, digestive issues. Like auricular acupuncture is wonderful for everything, and it's safe, and it's something that anybody should be able to do. It like, you know, it's like, yeah, you can jack it up like anything, right? Like you can burn water, but auricular acupuncture is fairly safe and something that everyone should be able to learn and to have access to, but we don't. And that's the problem that we're having, not just the lack of access to acupuncture, but the lack of access to wraparound services. This is how I got involved with a group called Designing Justice, Designing Spaces, because they made a pop-up. They took the Black Panthers on steroids, y'all. They made a pop-up village of wellness, and we would come, they would pay the healers to show up and then to treat whomever it is that showed up, so that medicine could be in the hands of the people, in the communities of the people, and a place where the people could be comfortable and not having to go into situations where you're going to these all white offices, dealing with all white people in all white neighborhoods at all white prices. So that's where we are today. Dr. Fan, I think you had a question for me.
Yeah, I have a question, and this is like, yeah, I mean, white spaces is definitely one of the things. It's the role of the occupiers, the role of like settler colonialism, right? So this kind of goes into both. So you mentioned Abraham Flexner, and the only reason why we have a profession, how most things have professions, is because of schools. Right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So this question is for schools. Some of y'all are still in school right now. Some of y'all just recently graduated, right? So my question is this: how did race play in your experience with school, and how did it also? I mean, you covered this a little bit, but how did it also shape your experience in the profession?
So race played major factors for my entire scholastic career, from bachelor's degree to doctorate degree. I started off at an HBCU. I went to Morgan State. I wanted to study electrical engineering with a minor in computer science. And I realized that that was definitely not something I was going to do for the rest of my life. I used to have panic attacks going to the engineering building. It was not the business. Right. My discovery of acupuncture is strictly due to medical racism. I was discriminated against as a Black female going to a Black school. I had a case of food poisoning that was misdiagnosed as inflammatory disease. And that's how I met Dr. Lee, who introduced me to Chinese herbs. And once I learned about Chinese herbs, and then I found out about acupuncture, and then I found out about Bastille, I never looked back. It was just like, this has been the only thing that has ever made a difference in my horrible cycles, and my breathing problems, and my back pain, and my anxiety, and all the things that I dealt with. And I had prescriptions, y'all. At 19 and 20 years old, I had about 7 running prescriptions at 20. It was the only thing that made me any better, as opposed to, you're going to take this for the rest of your life. So when I got to Bastille, I was quickly disenfranchised, because I went from a historically Black college and university to Seattle. And that was a kind of racism I had never experienced before. I mean, I had, but I had never experienced the kind of racism that you experience in Seattle, because it's kind of polite office bitch. Like, you don't know, you know that you're offended, but it's really hard to put your finger on it, because this person is so nice and so sweet, and they're smiling at you, and they're all happy, happy go Lori. And I'm just like, I want to strangle you. So my entire 3.5 years at Bastille was 100% riddled with microtraumas, whether it's professors who say, you know, we can't see that on your skin, it's too dark. I had the dean of our clinic one day who walked in to our treatment area where we discuss with our supervisors before we go and we treat the clients in the clinic. He walked in and he said, I'm like, what? And everyone's looking like, what did he say? And we're all just looking like, okay, that's definitely not Chinese. Don't know what that is. He's like, that's Swahili for your mama. And I'm like, are you playing right now? What the hell is wrong with you? Only Black face in the room. Nearly the only Black face in my program. The other 2 Black faces in my program completely dropped out within the first year. I had classmates that were my friends who would crack slave jokes. I had classmates who would virulently support their use of the N-word to my face. And I'm like, I have never in my life dealt with nothing like this ever before, because I'm used to like a good old fashioned racist. I'm used to somebody who will just walk up to me, tell me they don't like me because I'm Black, and they keep it pushing. I'm like, sweet, you stay over there, I'm gonna stay over here, and I know what to do. But like the psychological torture that was going to school for me was rough. And it took me years to recover from being at Bastille. And I felt hunted and I felt preyed upon. And I was a part of a movement to bring a Black student union to Bastille, because I'm like, why is there no cultural training in here? How are you just letting these people out into the world? You're inflicting them on the world, and they don't know their left from their right. You have a school who wouldn't allow a woman who was Muslim to stay dressed and covered in a class. You know, you had students who didn't know that a Muslim woman in clinic is not taking off her hijab. It's not going to happen, right? Stop asking. We have people who would belittle Hispanic men in front of women. It's just like, that's a cultural no-no, dude. You don't do that. Like, what's wrong with you? So you're inflicting these people out into the world. And 10 years, I found out 10 years after we started the Black Student Union and we got the board and the deans and the vice presidents and the presidents together, that the student body at Bastille showed up with nearly the exact same complaints a decade later.
Yep.
So that was my experience in acupuncture school, and it made it hard. I was broke. I was discriminated against regularly. I dealt with microtraumas regularly, and I just wanted to make it through so that I could bring this medicine to people who look like me, because I had never seen another one of me before.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had I had questions for you, but like, I feel like you just really knocked them out of the park at the beginning. And, you know, how did race play a part in how acupuncture is regulated today? You really kind of nailed. So I guess the question is do you think that we're going to be able to combat or deal with our racist history and our racist proclivities in our profession today? Do you see that going forward anywhere?
I see, as long as there's a profession, it's really hard to deal with race in a productive way, because you have a profession that's predominantly white governed, right? If you look at the 3 primary organizations, I mean, CAB is a very different entity because they're state mandated. So they're actually one of the few government mandated organizations that has to have specific racial diversity, which I didn't find out until I was doing my ethnography. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's still no Black representation at all, of course, you know. But when it comes to like Council of Colleges, ACOM, NCCAOM, they're predominantly white and they're white run, right? So with that being said, you can have some of the most woke people in these organizations, but like innately still embody the structural inequalities that is like embedded. I mean, most of the white folk who get into, from my experience ethnographically and through like my experience in school, there's this element of Orientalism that got them allured in the first place, right? Whether they were doing some kind of martial art or like they like the exotic East, right? Mind you, here's a little side note. Y'all know that like traditional Chinese medicine is only like 60 or 70 years old, right? Like it was created in 1959, by the People's Republic of China. Bianzhong Lun Qi, that idea of like yin and yang deficiency, liver qi stagnation, those categories were created in 1958, okay? So just like my dad is older than traditional Chinese medicine. I need to put that out there, right? So like when you have something that's that new, and by the way, the numbering system we have for acupuncture, that wasn't created until like the late 70s, early 80s, because they had to have this uniform system by the World Health Organization. Because at the end of the day, people didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Sorry for swearing, but like they really didn't know what they were doing, I mean, but this is the beauty of it, because like, so think about this. Think about that people were just kind of making stuff as they get along, they go on, right? And creating a whole profession by that. Like literally a whole profession on that, right? So, and I'm not saying this is hyperbolic, because acupuncture does wonders. It's amazing. But guess what? No one really knows how it works. No one to this day knows how it works. And I know this because I worked with two of the lead researchers that created the biggest meta-analysis for lower back pain, which had a sample size of 17,000, p-value of 0.01, right? So like very like perfect randomized control trials, meta-analysis, and they came to the conclusion of this. It doesn't matter how long you've practiced acupuncture. It doesn't matter how many needles you put in for people. It doesn't matter what style that you do, right? It's better than sham, and it's better than nothing, right? But with that being said, we have a whole program, at least the master's. I'm not even going to talk about the doctorate, but the master's is 4 years. 4 years from something that was created in the 50s that has no empirical data to back it up, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're really good at, we're good at individualized medicine, right? Mm-hmm. We really know how to treat the individual, right? But with that being said, the profession is built on a house of cards, and no one realizes that, literally, and this is what to me was like so fascinating, is that if you look at the curriculum for CALE, for the California Acupuncture Licensing Exam, if you look at the NCCAOM, right, you try to look, let's try to have a standard here. You try to look for safety, because at the end of the day, every single state acupuncture board has one commitment that's uniform to protect the general public, which is safety, right? How much of our curriculum is based on safety? So CALE, it fluctuates from 5% to like, I think the highest I saw on the field was 9%, right? For the CALE exams, because they actually show you how much percentage is devoted to that. NCCAOM, if you like cut it down, and I've spent like a few hours doing this, like how much actually of hours is like dependent on safety, right? Is like, it sums up to be roughly like 3 days if you add everything together, right? So that's the curriculum that we're supposed to base the whole profession on. So all the rest, and I'm gonna argue, I'm sorry to offend 5-element people here, but J.R. Worsley literally created his own medicine, right? And he stole a lot of it from Japanese acupuncturists. You know, you can read about this in my dissertation. There's several, there's another, Chasing the Yellow Emperor. He wrote about this too. He went much more obsessively into this. But the participants who I interviewed are actually like old school Worsley practitioners. One of them being my advisor. And I asked her point blank, you know, like my PhD advisor, who she's like the head of the whole Chinese health and humanity at University College London right now, which is hilarious. But like I asked her, so what was like the curriculum like for Worsley? She's like, well, we kind of ran around the fields naked and just sometimes read books on alternative medicine. I'm like, are you serious? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, that's really fascinating, you know? So that is the structures of what, like when it comes into the United States and it becomes this this power thing built on the state, built on state power, right? Because that's the scary part. You can practice, just think about any yoga practitioners here, right? Any of them? Anyone have done yoga? Cool, right? So just imagine that in order to be a yoga teacher, and this one's gonna make you itch a little bit, you have to learn Bikram, the Bikram method, in order to be teaching yoga. You know how many people would be pissed off about that? But see, that's the thing. That's where we're at today, right? There's no empirical data that proves that one school supersedes another. There's no like data clinically on like 5 elements better than TCM or Richard Ton or distal points, any of this. This is the problem where we're at. So you're at, I know this is a little bit like a tangent about like, how do we get racism out of the equation? As long as it's embedded with the state power, like I said from the beginning, you know, state power and the mechanisms of the state is built on inequality, right? That's how it functions, you know? So you can rebrand racism, but it's still racism, right? You know, they can say, oh, well, slavery's gone, but we just call it the 13th Amendment, right? You know what I mean? So like, this is what I'm trying to get at, is that like, yeah, you can rebrand it, great. That appeased things on paper, but the actuality of the continual marginalizations of Asian Americans is still real, right? The continual effects that like we cannot practice our medicine is real. I live in the state of Pennsylvania, right? My son, who is 6 years old, can sell herbs, technically, under an LLC, right? I mean, protected by the LLC, of course. Let's give another example. Sean. Sean lives in Greensburg right now. He also spends his time in Pittsburgh. He can sell herbs legally. If I sell herbs in my clinic, I'm arrested because I'm a licensed acupuncturist and not what they call a practitioner of Oriental medicine, right? And that's all over because I didn't take the herb exam. And you know why I didn't take the herb exam? Because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, right? And it's protected by the federal government. If you want to create like a whirlwind of hell, practice herbs as a licensed acupuncturist in Pennsylvania and ask them to arrest you. Because what that's going to trigger is an effect of basically antitrust issues, right? For monopolies, but also they're going to be messing with the 1994 Dietary Supplements Act, right? Which basically states that the government, the federal government, cannot touch herbs or dietary supplements. It went as far as Mel Gibson went on in this shit. You can look on YouTube and put like Mel Gibson and herb or diet supplements commercial, right? This was argued for, right? And this is why anyone can basically sell and distribute herbs. But that's getting to be limited because of these lobbying powers, right? So like places like California to an extent, North Carolina, Florida, right? the access of these herbs, which you can buy at any grocery store in Pittsburgh, right? You can buy yin chow or any of that stuff. You can buy all that stuff in like a Chinese grocery store, right? Are now only relegated to qualified practitioners. Yo, like, people don't realize what foot people are stepping on. See, the profession hasn't stepped on the wrong foot yet, right? They stepped on feet, but they haven't stepped on the wrong feet yet, right? They're having these turf wars with chiropractors and physical therapists. But, you know, like, physical therapists and chiropractors are crafty. They're smart. They know that, like, at the end of the day, it's not an acupuncture needle. It's a solid filiform needle. You know, that's technically what it's called. And by the way, y'all, here's another history lesson. The solid filiform needle that we use for acupuncture, the Chinese didn't adopt it until the 1930s. So you think that you want to practice classical acupuncture? If you want to really use classical acupuncture, get a stick or a pine needle. That's classical acupuncture, right? And bloodletting, that's some classical stuff. And while we're at it, yeah, get some exorcism too, because that was classical acupuncture. Technically, that's what it was in Ma Huangde text, right? Mm-hmm. And like, these were like classically trained, right? So yeah, cupping is not just in French hospitals, in Greek, it's like a Hellenic thing, you know, it's ancient Greek, right? So like, what I'm trying to get at is this, is that if you have a profession that's built on inequality, how do you actually reverse it? You can create more competency levels, whatever that means. That's what they like to pride themselves on. What does that actually mean? You know, none of them talk about like any kind of racial sensitivity training, let alone any of the multitude of like patient-informed care issues, right? They don't care about that. Right? No. They might appease like some people here and there, but that's not mandatory, right? So this is what I'm trying to get at. My concern is this, is that if we continue to get distracted and to give us little crumbs to appease the masses, we will lose sight of the actual systemic racism that the profession was built on and continue to invoke. Right. So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to end the question with this, but like, and answering your question is this, in my monograph that I'm writing right now, there is one paragraph by the FDA that can completely eliminate the whole profession. And no one ever has like thought about this at all. They're looking at it the wrong directions. I'm not going to totally divulge everything, because I need to contact lawyers and other professions on this. But like me and my, a few of my lawyers already were like, oh yeah, lawyer friends. I was about to go to law school 2 years ago. I was about to take the LSATs, then someone pulled a gun on me. But you know, the day before that happened. But there's literally one paragraph, one line. It's actually one line that can completely destroy the whole profession. And guess what? You know how to make it accessible? Like the Panthers, were there a profession then? No, right? Oh, was there a profession? Yeah, they just did it, right? And guess what? People were like, well, maybe it's not safe. What other country does it? England. That's another country that does it. The United Kingdom does not have any regulations on acupuncture. None whatsoever, right? And if y'all want to question about like safety, how many of y'all know how to do a severe adverse event or adverse event recording? How many of y'all know how to do that? None of y'all do. I can guarantee it. You know why? We're not trained in safety. Mm-hmm. So if we want to talk about safety as the main goal, we're not even trained to do that. And that's the main goal for all the state boards anyways, you know? So yeah, I'm gonna take a quick bathroom break. I drank so much tea. I'll be back.
While you do that, I'm going to run through some of these comments. Shelby, I don't know where you went to school, but holy macaroni, because that was the first thing that I seen. That is That's a lot that went on there. I am just running through questions because I don't know what else to do with Tyler being gone, unless someone wants to like come on and Sean, help me out if there is a question. There's no money in the individual. So how can people keep from practicing capitalism versus education? You know, like everyone deserves the right to eat. Like I deserve the right to eat. I want to have a house and a car and take care of my kid and go on vacation. But the way that acupuncture is practiced, where people can't afford to live and can't afford to see their practitioners 2 to 3 times a week, which is a way that it's designed to be treated, and that our government is not in support. Our government and our insurance policies are not in support in covering the cost of acupuncture so that it is something that's affordable. Like that's the problem. Like we live in a capitalistic society. And so I don't see how we're going to make it affordable. And the best situation that I've seen out of that is what Polka is doing. I love Polka to pieces. I wish I had the chi to keep up with that. But I don't, right? Other than when I'm doing events like Designing Justice, Designing Spaces, and the Village pop-up, right? There was money being paid to me as an individual, and it was enough to cover my expenses and my gas and everything else. And then I could treat the people. And that's what this model should look like. It should be a top-down medicine where if you are able to provide some kind of primary care to folks, then they should be paid a living wage to be able to provide primary care to individuals, and we should be better trained in terms of safety, right? But acupuncture in a general whole, so long as you're staying away from the torso, is mostly safe. You can't really jack it up. You can make somebody tired, right? You can give them a bruise, you can give them nerve damage. You might give them upset stomach, especially if they haven't eaten and they have low glucose. But like our profession is fairly safe as long as you're staying away from the torso. Welcome back, Dr. Fahn. I'm gonna be back. I'm gonna be with you.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So, Tanisha, the question I have for you, another one, is that what advice do you have for current and future Black students of acupuncture?
So I've had a while to think about this question, and I've answered this question repeatedly. And the first thing that I'm going to say is go into school knowing that you're going to come out with wounds. The same as a soldier knows that if you go to war, there's a high likely possibility that you're coming back with something, right? But just because you're going to come back with scars, whether they're spiritual or emotional, or Ren one in a circle yelling barf, whatever that was, Shelby, I would love to hear that story. It's worth it. Like, it's worth learning the medicine. Like, I would tell people, go to Pocatech. Like, I would tell you to find the easiest way to learn this medicine, because it is a beautiful and elegant solution to a lot of health problems. But know that you're going to school with a bunch of white people, and know that you're going to treat a bunch of white people, and know that your administrators and your teachers and the people who run the clinic are going to be a bunch of white people, and that it's still worth it. Like, that is my biggest answer. I cried a lot at Bastille. I cried and I raged nearly every day. Before smash rooms were a thing, I had invented my own way of being able to smash things at construction sites. I would go buy furniture at like Goodwill. I would go buy cheap plates and other breakable items, and I would find some place to go destroy things because I had so much rage locked in me dealing with Bastille University, right? Learn what you can learn. Take all that information with you. Take all your resources. Take all your books with you, and know that it's not for naught. And know that the books that they're giving you aren't the end all, that be all. Learn some decent needling technique, because chances are you're going to want to go back to a melanated community, and we have iatrophobia. We have a legitimate reason to have fear of doctors, needles, and medical procedures. So please learn how to needle in such a way that it doesn't hurt. And many people have really craptastic needling technique. I have needle phobia. I have tiny veins. I have been tortured with needles my whole life. And I have acupuncturists that I love as people who are not allowed to stick me, period. Learn how to be a public servant, because that's where your greatest good is going to come from. My students this semester at ACHS where I'm teaching, like I made their midterm being like, pick a project. How do you intend to bring your dreams, your fruition, your ideas into the community so that you're helping people under whatever context or guise, whatever the population is, like learn how to be a public health servant, because that's where our greatest good is. And never, ever, ever forget that what we're treating more than anything else in this medicine is the person that's right in front of you, not the statistics, not the numbers, not the funny names, not the symptomologies, not the roots and the branches. You're treating a person, and that's where this medicine is truly unique. All right.
So, thank you so much, Tanisha. That is wonderful. That's great. Yeah, I think this medicine has a lot to offer. And the thing is that it's built on complexities for no reason, right? Like, that's the thing. And like, how many of y'all went to school where you couldn't even needle yourself the first day? How many of y'all went to school also where they tell you to not even needle yourself, period? Right? Like they're saying, oh, you might mess up.
Learn though, like
yeah,
that's like giving a kid a PlayStation and telling them they can't cut it on. Like, who's really going to do that?
Totally. So one of the most beautiful things that happened for me was the first time I needled myself. I was 15 years old, and I think it was in July 20th this year. I marked my 20th anniversary of doing acupuncture, right? And then like when I was 15 years old, I remember the first time I needled myself, I was like, whoa, damn, I can help myself. I can literally help myself. Yeah. So like, that's one of the things that I think these schools purposefully make us alien to our own bodies.
Yeah. And you would think that this would be where we would look, we're talking about the balancing of yin and yang. We're talking about balancing the 5 elements. We're talking about how all of this is supposed to be about bringing the body into harmony. And yet you're not really encouraged to just see what those sensations are in and of yourself so that you can better recognize them in other people. Why is that? Like, what kind of nonsense is that? When we're talking about a medicine that was built and founded on the ideas of observation, right? This is just observation. This is how people paid attention to their bodies, and they paid attention to the world around them, and they paid attention to the bodies in front of them. And so, we got Asian medicine out of it, right? And the whole different, there's so many. That is the other thing, right? Why are our schools, like, not only are you not encouraged to pay attention to your own body, but we are given these ideas that are a monolith, that TCM is the system, or 5 element is the system. I didn't get an introduction to Japanese acupuncture. I didn't get introduced to Korean acupuncture. I realized that I was blessed to get introduced to auricular acupuncture, right? Yeah. Like, we don't get introduced to so many things. We're not encouraged to explore. We're encouraged to memorize and regurgitate.
And that's the thing. Even when you said like Korean acupuncture, because if you go to Korea, there's a multitude of practices. You go to Japan, there's a multitude of traditions, right? And this is the thing, is that like we are taught that there is this monolith, right? There's this like way of thinking, and this is the only way. But this is the thing. This is the whole thing about it, is that this was constructed, right? We have to realize this was constructed, what we see today. And at the end of the day, Chinese medicine, if you want to talk about Chinese medicine explicitly, it has gone through transitions so many times over the past 2,000 years. And if anyone tells you it's 5,000 years, it's total bullshit. It's only 2,000 years. And what we know of it as we see it is probably in the 20th century, right? So like, that's the thing, is that like, it just shows you, like, like I was saying before, the use of the filiform needle that we're all used to, right? That was introduced by the Japanese to China in the 30s, right? And like, you have to understand that like what people meant by, acupuncture back in like the Yellow Emperor's Classic in the Ling Shu, right? They're mostly talking about bloodletting, and then we get lectured about, oh yeah, you're not doing it right because you're supposed to put in the needles for X amount of times. Does anywhere in the Ling Shu or Su Wen, it tells you, oh, you're only supposed to put the needles for 30 minutes in there or like an hour and a half? Does it? I challenge anyone to like tell me where it says that in the Ling Shu, because you're not going to find it, because a lot of this is built on Orientalism. It's these fantasies, right? If you really want to know how like us Asians think, there's some things that we have in common, right? Like, why do people like ginseng so much? Because it looks like a human being. Literally, it looks like a human being, right? Why do people take like deer antlers? Because it's horny, literally. And what does that indicate, right? It's literally that simple, because it looks like this. It looks like that, right? It's like what you're saying, Tanisha. It's observation, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this shit out. But once it gets codified and to become like a professionalized medicine, that's when we run into problems. And Maria asked us the question, how do can we speak to how we can be good allies within the profession as white Western practitioners if there is time? I'm going to say this: be accomplices. Fuck being allies. Start being accomplices. Because guess what? All the changes that happen don't come from inside, right? You think that like Council Colleges, ACOM, CAB, Nevada, any of these regulatory organizations care. They don't care about you and me. They care about making profit. That's first and foremost, right? A viable profession to make profit. And guess what? If any of y'all read my dissertation, y'all realize this, that in 2016, before El Cheeto came into office, right? 18 schools were about to be closed down. 18 schools were about to be closed down by Obama's gainful employment recommendation. You all can look on this in my dissertation. So close from closing down. But guess what happened? Betsy DeVos came into the Department of Education. And guess what she was known for? For-profit universities. And what are a lot of these universities? For-profit universities, right? Because they're profitable. What do you think the first professional doctorate's there for? You think you're getting a better education? You're getting more competencies? No, you're not. You're just getting sold. You're marketed that you are, right? It's the biggest capitalist trick, And what sucks is that people are in debt from this, right? People are hurting, I know y'all are hurting, right? So to respond to Maria again, like, we need accomplices to take this down, right? And that's how you bring access, right? That's literally how you bring access,
So when someone asks me that question, what can I do? I say, be loud, be seen, be heard. As silence is violence and silence is compliance. If you know that something is fucked up, then you need to be loud, you need to be seen, you need to be heard. And I know that can be terrifying. I know it can be scary. And I know, all the emotional rigmarole that goes into it. And, I remind folks that Dr. Fong can't stop being Asian. I can't stop being Black. And it doesn't stop any of the horrific experiences that we have on a day-to-day basis. So an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. Stand up, do something, get the medicine out to where it needs to be. Go to the local meetings, stand up at the schools, become a part of the boards, be like Elizabeth Rapp that I see over there in the corner, change some laws, become an advocate, you know, talk to your senators, talk to your congressmen, whatever your skill set is, because everybody can get in where they fit in. I'm not saying that you have to take on the impossible challenge, but you have to be an accomplice in making it better. I know that this is getting long and there are people out on the West Coast, so I think it might be a good idea to see if there are some questions, specific ones. I'm rolling back through the chat that people wanted to get asked so that they didn't feel like they weren't being seen and heard. What do you think about that, Dr. Ben?
Absolutely.
All right. So are there some specific questions? I'm just kind of rolling through and seeing if I can pick some out. Ministry, I'm down for the NAT ministry.
Aaliyah, you had a question? Yeah, Sean, can you unmute Aaliyah?
Hey, mama, how you doing?
Should be able to unmute themselves now.
Good, how are you?
Wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm in Canada because I left the States because I felt that Canada was a better option of just not going through the bureaucracy of education and paying all this money and barely getting an education. And of course, the whitewashing of education. I totally get that. But Canada has its own issues. And so I was just in class and the teacher had mentioned that the reason why it was 25 to 30 minutes was because of the full cycles of the body and how each channel actually gets, I believe it was a specific amount of, right. And so then if you break that down, you get that rough 25 to 30 minutes. Is he wrong? Because I feel like I'm studying for the test, but I'm like, you just pointed out some stuff. And again, you've shared a lot of nuggets. And again, there's no one final way, but I'm finding a lot of what I'm studying with everybody, including the Black Acupuncture student group, is that information varies drastically.
You answered that question. Information does vary rapidly. I'm not going to say he's wrong because I'm an anthropologist. I'm a relativist. I believe that people have their own systems of doing things, right? Channels in relation to acupuncture points were not a thing until the 11th century. So I'll throw that out to you, right? To actually say that it goes through these channels in a specific cycle, that relates more with astrology, right? I mean, some of the first acupuncture texts were based on astrology. I'm not going to say he's wrong again, because like, that's what he was trained. That's what he thinks, right? I'll say this. I've put needles in people for like 2 minutes and get rid of their altitude sickness in Bhutan. And I put needles in people for an hour and a half. Similar results.
All of them are right.
Yeah.
Right. Community acupuncture is a great place to see that, because you will see you can't sit longer than 15 minutes. They have got to get up. That's it. That's all they got. And then I've seen the sleepers, the people who go into deep, heavy comatose like comas and under needles for 2 or 3 hours, and then they're done. The body is done when the body is done, and that's when the body is done. And if you're doing individualized medicine, then you'll see when that body is done. Our particular love of turning people over every 30 minutes is about room volume and scheduling, as far as I'm concerned. If you're room over every 30 minutes, then every 30 minutes or so, you're getting somebody else in that room, and then you're having a volume of clients and you're making money. I didn't get into this medicine to treat people like cookie cutters and to treat them the same way that I was treated with Western medicine, where I got 5 minutes with my doctor and I had a question and they had to go look it up, but I knew that guy was never coming back. He was out the door and the nurse was coming back with my answer along with my discharge papers and your lab test or whatever it is that you had to do. People's constitution determines the length of the treatment. In my not quite as long as Dr. Phan's experience. Your constitution, your condition determines the length of that treatment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see a question from Cassie, or a statement from Cassie. Very much like Aaliyah, I think that education is cheaper in other places if you can deal with the language, if there is a language barrier to deal with. So if you can go to China, or you can go to Japan, or you can go to Korea, or you can go to Vietnam, or you can go somewhere authentic and learn the medicine there, you should, because it's a very different educational experience than the one that you're going to get here in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I did here in Pittsburgh, I was teaching for like 2 years, was learning TCM, all of TCM in 7 days. Like everything. What y'all learn in 4 years, I can teach in 7 days. And it all comes from how y'all, yeah, because it all comes from how y'all diagnose. It's all patterns, right? It's all memorization of patterns, right?
Mhm.
So you have like the organ or bowel, the zang fu, right? Kidney, liver, whatever. And then you have either yin or yang, right? And then or like qi, right? And then you have either stagnation, deficiency, or excess. And that all goes through the rubric of what they call the 8 principles. The 8 principles are yin, yang, hot, cold, internal, external, deficiency, excess. That's it. It's really simple, you know. But guess what? They like to make shit hard for you so that you can like be like, oh, damn, like this is gonna take forever to learn. It's not. If you see fucking red and it's hot, probably it's heat, right? If it's like someone's cold all the time, maybe they're cold. It doesn't take it. I don't even do that shit anymore. Like I don't even read pulses. I even have a YouTube, like my YouTube pulse video has 160,000 hits on it. And guess what? I don't even read pulses anymore. I can just literally look at someone in 30 seconds and just already know what I'm going to do. It's simple for me, you know?
Pretty much half the stuff that you learn in TCM school, you're not going to keep. You're not going to
No.
do not use those 300 points. I use the same 50 to 60 points on everybody and everything. And I have treatment protocols that I have just kind of pared everything down to, and we're going to start here and make minor adjustments as need be with each individual. But that goes back to, this is an individualized medicine. And that we don't understand how this medicine works, you know, outside of to say that there is definitely a switch in the vagal activation from sympathetic to parasympathetic. That's half the battle, because most of us, especially in this country, are stressed to the gills, and there can be no without it.
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm like currently looking at school. I'm not in school yet. So I'm trying to think of what to do. So people are recommending Polka Tech.
Yeah.
I think you have a question from Rocky.
Yep, I was just about to say, there she is. Oh, Robbie, I can't hear you, and I want to.
Yeah, comments where I wrote it out. Oh, yeah. Oh no, let me get. Okay, very bad.
In the meantime, I think Stephen has a question too about the power struggle over the needle.
What's the question, Stephen?
Can you hear?
Or Robbie? I think you're going to have to type your question out. You have really sketchy Wi-Fi.
Okay, yeah. Go up. The question about the ASA, and like how much they want, they say that they're community acupuncture. Is that the question?
That looks like looking for it.
Can you hear me?
Kind of. It sounds like your Zoom is intoxicated.
I was thinking the Matrix personally, but okay, I can go for drunk Zoom.
Okay, it says, this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to do community medicine and community acupuncture. How does everyone feel about that? Is that what, like, is Li Ming Sang is I don't know what pronoun they go by, but like, is that what, are they a part of ASA, or they're part of ASA? Does she have like or he have an executive, or they have an executive position? Yes and yes. Okay. Great. You know, how are they going to implement that? You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm wondering. What I'm finding, like, and I've been like tackling this beast for almost a decade now, is that like, I don't believe that is true, but it's nice that they put it out there. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things, is that like when you work within the systems, it's really hard to change things. And that's why I think there needs to be an integrative medical approach to changing things from the outside, from like people who are, you know, you ever heard the term "my enemies, my man," right? Chiropractors, physical therapists, medical doctors, they can all join forces and like with like Captain Planet, all their powers combine and change stuff, right? Because I think the only ones who don't have the logic, sadly enough, are acupuncturists. They are their own worst enemies.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the big thing about it, you know, like, and that hasn't changed. That's their logic. They have this like really, it's not rational at all. It's like protecting the turf that's based on like kind of anti-intellectualism. So you have to kind of think, not to like offend people here, but you kind of have to think like a Trumpster. You know what I mean? Like to understand that kind of logic, because it defies logic. You know, they're not in the logic game, right? They're in the game of like protecting their turf, but not having anything to back that up. You know, I don't want to like bash on them too much, but yeah, I think I don't really trust that many people are in these regulatory organizations. I like what ACE is doing to an extent, but there seems to be a lot of conflict, or like not conflict, but like differing ideas that are coming out from them. So I don't really understand like if they have a consolidated thought process on like what the outcome is or what they want, you know. I don't know if that answers your question, Robbie.
I like the idea of what they're trying to do. I like the concept of what they're trying to do. I want it to actually happen, but I want it to happen like Lincoln. I want it to happen like Designing Justice, Designing Spaces. I want it to happen like Mandela Pop-Up Village. I want people to just be able to have access, learn the medicine, treat themselves, you know, treat their communities, and take it away from what it's turned into. And I say this as a person who is a mobile acupuncturist and has a very expensive price point, and that's because I'm going to be sitting in your house for 2 hours, right? But if there was a power that be that paid for me to be there, then it wouldn't cost anybody anything. I would very happily work in situations where I could earn a living wage, take people away from potentially racially damning situations where you're going to be re-triggered and re-traumatized, and just treat people. I don't even want money to be involved in it. I just want to be able to pay my bills and take care of my kid and go on vacation and take care of my own health care, right? So I hope that we get there. I do. I don't believe it. Just like I don't think that Orange Cheeto is going to leave the office quietly.
Yeah, I don't think Orange Cheeto is gonna leave the office quietly, or I don't think Biden's gonna be our saving grace too.
God no.
I mean, it's just pacification of the masses, right? Like, I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna get too political on that shit.
Well, let's get past that one. Did we get to Stephen?
Yeah, Stephen, your question.
I just said that since the profession, so I work as an acupuncturist as well in Wisconsin at a healthcare organization as an employee. But since the profession is really a power struggle over the needle, and that was a great point that you made, Dr. Fan. What are your thoughts for the both of you around teaching some of our accessory techniques like gua sha, cupping, and tuina to patients and to the general public? Yes, I love your ear seats. I actually have a pack of each to Dr. Dandridge, and we used them at our employee engagement event recently. So thank you for those.
Excellent. So that's my answer. The issue with the idea behind this medicine is that so much of it is something that you would have learned from your mother and your grandmother, right? You would have been sick, and like, I know what it was like in a Black household when you got sick. You got a hot toddy, right? With a whole bunch of lemon and honey and a healthy dosing of brandy in it. You got Vicks smeared all over you, front to back. You got wrapped up like a burrito, right? Your mother made you sweat to death. And you got a whole bunch of orange juice and some soup, right? Like, these were our folk remedies for dealing with stuff. And then, like, if you had a great grandmother around, then you made sure you got some greens and some bone broth, and a whole bunch of garlic and onions and thyme and oregano. And all this is pretty useful in terms of your typical cold, right? But what we don't get, and what we should be getting, is this information that you can do gua sha and scraping, that you can do cupping, that you can do ear seeds, that you can do acupressure, that you can do a whole host of things to yourself, for yourself, as a part of like brushing your teeth and combing your hair and putting on your makeup. But we don't know those things. And then we have people who turn, you know, gua sha into the Graston technique. I'm still pissed off about the Graston technique, like more than anything else. Like, he's trademarked this. We have a company that has trademarked ear seeds. You can't call anything else ear seeds. But why not? Right? Like, how do you do that? Why doesn't everyone know that you can just like pop one down in the lower concha down there, and that is where your auricular nerve is, excuse me, your vagal branch of your auricular nerve. And if you need to be able to get the body out of a stress response, then let's push right here and combine that with deep breathing or singing or drumming or Tai Chi Chuan or anything else that's going to slow your body down so that you can begin to come out of that stress response. We don't get that. We get smile and think happy thoughts. So I think that all the 10,000 little grandmother things that we should have grown up with, like we grew up with drink orange juice for the vitamin C, right? Even though there are better choices. Like, we grew up with have soup, right? But we mean real soup, not the stuff, not Campbell's, right? We mean great grandmama's soup that's been cooking since like 8 o'clock last night, and had all the bones and the meat and all the different things in it and all the different nutrients, pot liquor, so that you could actually get some dense nutrition in a liquid, slowly cooked format so that your body can deal with it. I think that that should be a part of our general education, in the same way that we know how to exfoliate our skin, right? In the same way that we know to wash our face and to be gentle around our eyes, you know, so that we don't increase our wrinkles. But we don't learn any of that stuff. And even when we come across that information, we still have Flexner, right? Flexner hangs over our head like a dirty cloud. And we think that all of this stuff is snake oil salesman medicine. We think it's all fake. And there is research, and there is studies, and there is things that say, you know, this stuff is actually pretty good for you and you should think about it. We're now talking about vitamin D is not such a bad idea for COVID, and so is vitamin C. Let's do that. Why don't we already know that that's one of the ways that we should be taking care of our immune systems? And one of the many ways that you can get that is by making a good old pot of soup with some greens and some bones. You got your magnesium, you got some vitamin C with your greens. You go sit outside instead of under our fluorescent lights all day long. Get you an extra dose of vitamin D to help you get through the winter, and have vitamin D rich foods. Why don't we know that? So one of the things that I did with the Black Acupuncturist Association is that we made a tool, and we made a tool that included, sorry, you didn't get these, Stephen, but now we have like little flyers, right? So that people can just see like, hey, here are some really easy, non-terrifying ways that you can put these stickers on yourself just to be able to bring about some wellness, because it should be everyday medicine.
Yeah. And Stephen, are you, I can't see your face, but the thing is that, and you don't have to put your camera on, but like for us Asians, like doing gua sha is like, what's up, Stephen? For us Asians, like we grew up on gua sha. Like, you ever heard half Chinese? So you're probably familiar with this. Like with the quote unquote boat people of Vietnam, when they got sick, you know what they did? They know about pennies. You know why they know about pennies? Because they scratching people with that, right? It's called Gao Ya, which is gua sha. Gao Ya, Ya means win. So, and Gao means shaving. So literally means shaving wind, right? So that's some like knowledge for y'all be dropping, right? So that in itself, right, is like what we brought with us, you know? And that's like what we can all teach anyone. Yeah. And like that's one of the things that I think is foreign that the professionalization does. It makes us, when you create a profession, you no longer have an intimate relationship with bodies anymore, especially your body, right? Like that is now a sanitized, medicalized thing. It's an entity that's foreign to you, right? But that's the problem, right? Because as acupuncturists, like we have this really innate understanding of bodies. And God, I hope y'all should like needle yourself. If y'all haven't done so yet, damn, do it now. Like feel what your body feels like. Like screw meditation, needle yourself, right?
Completely
Feel what
different
this
ball game.
medicine feels like. Yeah, completely
It's a totally different ball game. And when people are like, well, you could just meditate that away. I'm like, have you had an acupuncture treatment? Like, have you had a panic attack and then tried to go do some yoga? Because let me tell you, this shit don't mix. You cannot be panicking and then do downward facing dog and think that you're going to roll out of a panic attack or out of a trauma experience. But when you go under that needle and you get that nap ministry, that's a whole nother ball game. That is learning to sit with your own body and the effects of this medicine. And we're not talking about that. You are 100% right. I agree.
Yeah. And I'm not going to mention names here. Oh, is it illegal to needle yourself? No. But the question is, how are you going to get needles? eBay. But yeah, the thing is that like
Amazon, Walmart, it's a real thing, y'all.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna say is this: is that like, and then that's like the juice of my whole monograph is like access to needles, right? But this is what about Canada though? That's a little bit. Canada is, Aaliyah, you live in Ontario or Nova Scotia? What part? Oh, Toronto. Yeah, Ontario is pretty hard. They've been getting it really hard, like. And I know the people who are like kind of up to the regulations on that. But what I'm saying is this, is that if you, so I'll let you in on a little secret, y'all, is that one of the main people who were in that men's bathroom who created that law, I'm not going to tell you his name, but I had an interview with him, probably the worst interview I ever had with any of my informants. And I've had some bad ones, but he was like snake oil salesman, cult leader, all mixed in one, and it had a huge following. Not going to drop whose name it is, but I'll say this. He blatantly said to me, point blank, I'm like, well, if you wanted an outcome for acupuncture, what would it be? He said, what would it be with that? I would be handing out people bags of needles so that they can needle themselves and friends and family. I'm like, that's interesting. You created the laws. You're responsible for the laws of almost every single state in the United States. And you're saying that, you know, yeah, I am not going to mention names, but I'll just say like, he said he was not affiliated with the acupuncture school that he created. But if you look in the 990s, he was collecting $112,000 a year. So that's not any affiliation. I don't know what the hell is. But yeah, so that's just some kind of reference. No, Nichelle, not today. But
like, she is fishing.
She is fishing. She is fishing. But yeah, but when you see these old school old heads that are saying this, and like devoted their whole time making money and the last part of their life, right? Saying this, right? I kind of gave the like who it is, but like said that like to hand out needles and deprofessionalize, right? After having so many years of experience, that tells you something. That's a confession, right? That's a confession of what happened. If you all critically examine where we're at today with the profession, and maybe you'll have this light bulb moment and be like, what the fuck? How did we get here? Because I'm telling you this, and this is like my juice part. I'm not going to tell you how exactly, because like I said, got to work with lawyers, but like literally, there are simple tactics to take this whole profession down. And y'all probably saying like, why take this profession down? Remember what I said from the beginning. Medicine is different than the profession. Okay? Remember that. Medicine is different than the profession, right? And there is ways to do it. And people are just thinking within inside the profession, the laws within the profession, how you can reverse laws within the regulatory bodies of each state. No, think outside of that. And I kind of gave it away with the needle. So that's all I got to say about that, you know. But what I'm trying to let you all recognize is this, is that there are priorities. There are agendas for these schools. People are making money. It's just not us, right? There are specific agendas at place, right? You know, if you look at all these schools and who owns them, who actually owns them. You know, when I was doing my dissertation research, you know what my main motto was? Follow the money. If you follow the money, you gotta expose a lot of shit. And that's what I found. And you know what they said in 2015 or 2016, 2 presidents of acupuncture schools said this to me. I sure hope Donald Trump wins. I'm like, what? And I'm like, that's crazy. And then they're like, no, because I know that our business will still be up and running. And I'm like, okay, you said enough right there. You said enough right there.
That's a lot.
So yeah. I don't really know what else to say besides that, right? Like, there's more, and yeah, Betsy Davos and all that stuff. Like, within the next few months, I'm gonna be finishing up my monograph. I had to get it dropped from an academic press because there might be lawsuits, because I exposed like a lot of the like main heads of the profession in kind of unsavory ways. Because at the end of the day, a lot of them are just like, I hate to say it, sleazy white dudes who just wanted to make some money, you know, and took advantage of the situation, not knowing how many people are marginalized, how many people are alienated, how much like debt that people are in right now, right?
Yeah.
And we in exactly, and we in peak Rona right now, right? We are in peak Rona, right?
We're in peak Rona where everyone should be doing some scraping. Everyone should be doing some moxa. Everyone should be doing some cupping, where they have information that has been pouring out of China, information that's been pouring out of the continent, use of moxa. We have information where they're finding out about the efficacy of Asian herbs, and yet nobody's having this conversation, and we're having this really long conversation about let's stick everybody with an untried vaccine. Let's think about that. And then we're talking about things like pandemic fatigue, election fatigue. We're talking about racial battle fatigue. Again, one of the best things about this medicine is for its capacity to be able to deal with stress and mental health and being able to cut on the parasympathetic nervous system. And yet, nobody is talking about utilizing this medicine in order to just deal with even the simple things, much less the complex. We're not having those conversations.
Yeah.
And I'd be very curious to see, you know, where things are going to be in a year or 5 or 10.
Yeah.
With this profession.
Totally. Does anyone have any last questions before we're heading off here? East Coast, yeah, Aaliyah.
So this is being recorded. How can we access this to like share it with those that did not attend?
Yeah, this is gonna, it's all saved on the cloud right now, and I can send it off to Tanisha and post it on her website if there, yeah, we'll do that.
We can get it posted up on the Black Acupuncturist website. Again,
Yeah.
the idea behind this is to be able to drive traffic towards the, you know, the Black Acupuncturist Association so that we can find this tiny little percentage of people so that we can get the melanated community treatment with people who look like them. You know, and it's crazy how many acupuncturists don't realize like why that's important. There are arguments online every day about why that's important. If you are looking for the brown tape ear seeds, because I've gotten questions about that a couple of times since I put them up, you can go to blackacupuncturist.com and you will see ear seeds that are actually all brown tape. Don't let this one fool you. It is actually pretty brown, despite the fact that it looks like the traditional ugly tan color that you usually see for ear seeds. There is going to be classes and documents and different things to be able to disseminate to individuals so that they can start doing medicine on themselves, and more things soon come. But Rona in November was rough on everybody. 2020 has been rough. So y'all be patient with us. I am so proud that there is an existence of the Black Acupuncture Association and that we have found just about 100 Black acupuncturists across the country. But let that sink in. As hard as I've been digging to find melanated acupuncturists, we've only found about 100. We found them in the UK, we found them in Canada, we have found them in Sweden, we found a couple of them in Nigeria, and we're still continuing to look for them. So please, if you know of a person who is of African descent and they practice this medicine, make sure that you send them the website or that you give them my email. I'll type that in there. Here, I'll type in my email. And I'm slow on email, so don't be mad at me when it takes me like 5 days to respond to you because I have no site. But share the website and share the knowledge of this medicine, share the ear seeds, share gua sha, share cupping, share the knowledge, right? Stand up, be loud, be seen, be heard, because that's the only way that we're going to make a difference.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, it's been awesome. It's 11 o'clock here in the East Coast.
Night.
I need to sleep. But thank you all so much. Thank you everyone for your all support. Donate to Black Acupuncture Association, and we'll keep you all updated. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you guys again for coming and for participating and telling everybody about this. I appreciate every single one of you. And thank you, Dr. Fawn and Sean.
Thank you, Tanisha. Yeah, and Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Take care, everyone.
Night.